Hi, welcome back, Trickers and Truckers. For time for the final episode review of the day, which is Melora. Dr. Bashir and Lieutenant Dax are in the infirmary, testing out a wheelchair designed for Ensign Pazlar. Dax expresses amazement that the specifications are even in the replicator's database, saying she hasn't a wheelchair in over 300 years. Bashir reveals that they weren't. It was, in fact, Pazlar herself who had sent him the design and specifications due to the fact that her normal anti-grav unit won't work on Deep Space Nine, a situation that Bashir likens to the troubles they had when integrating Starfleet cargo lifts. Before they can discuss it further, Major Kira chimes in over the comms system, informing Bashir that the USS Yellowstone has just docked at Airlock 14. The doctor responds, telling her they're on their way, before taking the wheelchair and heading out with Dax. On the promenade, Bashir tells Dax that Ensign Pazlar must have had a hard time getting to the station, since she grew up on a planet with such a low surface gravity. Before Dax can reply, Chief O'Brien interrupts them, explaining that he's done the best he can with installing ramps, but that the Cardassian design has made it difficult. Bashir explains he has also been making some modifications to her chair, but O'Brien points out that there are still a lot of places where she won't be able to get to. Dax suggests they can help her by using the transporter, but, as Bashir explains, Melora Plaslar won't have it. She insists on getting about herself once her basic needs are met, a stipulation that Bashir greatly admires. He goes on to say that he has examined all of our medical files in preparation, then checks with the chief that her quarters are all ready. I would have the bumps on that to prove it, the chief jokes, commenting on the low gravity system he has installed. In the airlock, Melora is experiencing some difficulty walking. Using a walking stick, she makes it to the entranceway before Dax and Bashir appear around the corner. As the Melora Pazlar reporting for duty, she greets. Dax introduces herself and Bashir, though Melora already recognized him from their subspace communications. She notices her wheelchair, or trolley car as she calls it, and begins walking towards it. Dax offers her some assistance, but Melora abruptly refuses it. Taking a seat in the chair, she notices that it's different from the one she has practice on. Bashir clarifies, saying he wants to give her as much mobility as possible, but offers to change it back if that would help. No, I'll adapt, she adamantly replies, before driving it down the hall. As they walk over one of the ramps O'Brien installed earlier, Dax explains she'll be accompanying Melora on her upcoming survey mission to the Gamma Quadrant at the request of Commander Sisko. Melora objects, taking as a sign the commander thinks she needs extra help to get the job done, but Dax points out the commander wouldn't let any ensign take a runabout into the Gamma Quadrant the day after they arrive. As they approach Melora's quarters, she rather apathetically asks Bashir if he has made any modifications to her quarters as well. He carelessly replies that everything is as she requested it. With that, Melora says it was nice to meet them and heads over the ramp and into a room. Dax and Bashir exchange a confounded look before heading off themselves. In Quarks, a Uridian man named Ashrog is admiring one of the rings of Paltris. He says there are only 8 of them, but Quark just happens to have 42 in his possession, but wants 190 bars of gold-pressed platinum for them. Quark proposes they seal the deal over a drink, and so goes behind his bar to grab a bottle. As he approaches the doorway to his bar, a shady figure enters. Quark immediately recognizes him and is visibly unnerved by his presence. Fledcott is his name, and in a typical Quark way, it begins to flatter him with compliments though he isn't buying it. Leaning in closer, he tells Quark that he's business with him, that he has come to kill him. Meanwhile, in Sisko's office, Bashir and Dax are discussing Melora's situation with the commander when she arrives in Ops. She wheels right over Sisko, who welcomes her to the station. Seeing Bashir and Dax, she asks if she is late. If the meeting has already begun, but Sisko says he was just being informed about her request to pilot the runabout alone, something she expresses a wish to have been involved in. The commander states he regularly has briefings from senior staff regarding personnel issues, and this one is no different than any other. As they enter Sisko's office, she apologizes for sounding overly sensitive and explains that she is used to being shut out of the Melora problem, though she believes there is no Melora problem until people create one. She further objects to Dr. Bashir being present, saying she doesn't want to be treated like someone who is ill. The Commander Sisko doesn't see anyone doing that. Try sitting in the chair, Commander, she argues. No one can understand until they sit in the chair. Calming down slightly, she illustrates the struggle she has been through since leaving her homeworld, that she's always spent her time in one chair or another since. She shows her cane to Cisco and explains that it's made from the wood of a garlandic tree and that her family gave it to her when she left. She reveals how only a handful of Elysians have ever left her planet, but she knew she wanted to be one of them. How she dreamed of exploring the stars when she was a child, and that no chair or Cardassian station is going to stop her from attaining that dream. Cisco admires her, but he reiterates his concerns about sending her to the Gamma Quadrant alone. Melora says she can focus on the job better, but Cisco denies her request. Lieutenant Dax is going with her. They are due to leave tomorrow at 0730. A little while later, Bashir visits Melora's quarters and asks her how she's finding the low-gravity environment they have created for her. She describes the experience as slipping into a hot tub at the end of the day. Bashir jokes that he is a shower man before examining a photo on the desk, showing her and another man. He asks if it's her husband or boyfriend, but she doesn't answer him. Instead, she apologizes for her choice of words in the commander's office. She says she didn't mean to attack Bashir directly. He knows that she didn't mean any personal offense by it, but nonetheless points out that she does a lot of attacking, an attribute that she demonstrates when scorning Bashir's offer of friendship by telling her to call him Julian instead of Doctor. He makes her realize how others perceive her, how she was always on the defensive, and that surprisingly, asks her out to dinner at the new Klingon restaurant on the promenade. She accepts, much to his delight. In this bar, Quark is hard at work trying to appease his latest customer with a delicious home-cooked meal, serving back clover soup. Quark's former associate picks the dish and pours the soup onto the floor and drops the dish, right in front of Quark. Still thinking he could change his mind, Quark offers up some jumbo Vulcan mulk sauteed in Rumbolian butter. Ka takes a bite as Quark explains the game of Dabo and how his two excellent tutors, Dabo girls, can show him how to play. In an attempt to change his mind, Quark makes it clear he wants Ka to stay on the station to be as pleasurable as possible and, to that end, proposes his toast to old friends. To old adepts, replies Ka. At the Klingon restaurant, Bashir orders some Rosh, a double-barrel glass without the sauce, and a side over a Zimkash. He hands the plate to Melora, but she is immediately offended by it. Bashir, thinking how her reaction is due to the food looks, reassures her tastes good, but that's not what she means. Speaking of little Klingon, she barks the shed to provide Rach, where she can see the blood running through the veins. The Klingon laughs, noting, "A good customer knows what she wants," and snatches the plate from Bashir, flinging it and the food behind him. After a few seconds spent behind his kiosk, he returns with slight Rosh, as ordered. "That's nothing worse than half-dead Rosh," Melora jokes. As Bashir finishes off the last of the Rosh, he recounts the story to Melora. He tells her of how, when he was 10, he and his father were trapped on Invernia 2 during an ionic storm, and while they were waiting it out, he found a sick Ivernian girl. When the storm passed, his father helped the girl, but it was too late, and the girl died in front of his eyes. It was only later he found out that simple herb, which grew around all of them, could have saved her life. Melora asked if that was the reason he decided to study medicine, but Bashir jokes he first decided to study tennis, though he later found out he was better at medicine. She laughs at him, and there was a moment of silence as they gaze into each other's eyes. Melora suddenly breaks the silence and decides it's time to go. She has an early mission in the morning and wants to get some rest. The next day, Dax is walking down the corridor on her way to meet with Melora. She presses her door chime, but there is no response. She enters the quarters, but she isn't there either and isn't replying to her communication attempts. The computer tells Dax that Melora is on docking level 22, section 14. When she arrives, she finds Melora on the floor. The supports have malfunctioned. She explains how she had come to the storage bay as she wanted to get an extra astrometric array for her upcoming mission, but wasn't paying attention and fell. In the infirmary, Bashir is tending to Melora's minor injuries. He tells her they aren't serious, so she'll have to postpone her mission to the Gamma Quadrant until tomorrow. She upset with herself, saying that, if she had just paid attention, she would have been fine. Bashir explains to her that, in space, no one is completely independent. They all must depend on each other to some degree. When she is fit to leave, Bashir escorts Melora to her quarters. As they are walking down the corridor, he comments on some work Nathaniel Terras did 30 years ago, regarding low-gravity species. Melora recognizes this work, but discounts it as not having any practical success, though Bashir thinks the principle of sound and, with modern advances, should be able to walk in normal gravity in the future. As they arrive at her quarters, Melora asks him if he would like to come in. Initially hesitant, Bashir declines to allow her some time in low gravity, but Melora invites him in anyway. Disengaging with gravity, she flies out of her chair, doing a backward somersault in the air while Bashir looks on in amazement. She asks him to join her, and the two float into the air together, where he thanks her for allowing him to experience it with her. As they hang in midair, Melora tells Bashir that the man in the photo is her brother, before they lean in and kiss each other. Aww. The USS Orinoco arrives in the Gamma Quadrant with Dax and Melora on board. As they lay in their course, Melora asks the computer if there are any Vulcan etudes on file, and asks to play something by Delvac. Dax confesses she doesn't see Delvac as a Vulcan, as there's too much emotion in his music, but Melora likes it. It's pretty, she says. Turning to Dax, she asks if there is room for romance in Starfleet. Dax believes she has fallen for Dr. Bashir's charming bedside manner. Melora laughs, but, on a serious note, thinks our two species are completely different. Dax tells her, however, that she once knew a hydrogen-breathing Lothra who hopelessly fell in love with an Oxygen who were together for 57 years. Despite that, they could only spend 42 minutes a day in the same room as each other. Melora tells Dax the two Academy friends who got engaged, even though they were being assigned to different ships. They agree that love across light years through subspace is hard. But, as Dax puts it, look at the alternative. Back on the station, Quark has gone to see Odo about Cod, but he's surprised to hear the security chief is already aware of him. Odo Thompson Cod has recently been released from labor camp after the attempted hijacking of a shipment of Romulan ale, and Quark's name appears right next to his on the indictment. Quark maintains he has nothing to do with hijacking itself and was only the middleman, though Odo believes he sold out Cod to avoid himself going to the labor camp. Quark tells Odo Cod's plan to kill him, to which Odo can only smile at the prospect. He begs Odo to do something about it. "I'll do my job, Quark," he tells the Ferengi, nods and leaves the security office. "Unfortunately," mutters Odo. In the infirmary, Bashir is working away when Melora enters. He explains to her that he has been going over Nathaniel Terras's neuromuscular adaptation theory and that he believes he can make it work for her. Melora is extremely excited with the prospect, so much she begins to laugh in elation. If it works, she'll be able to walk without her servo controls and without the chair. A security deputy has brought Cod to the security office, where Odo is waiting for him. Cod asks if he has done something wrong. Odo replies that they both have something in common, they don't like Quark. However, he isn't prepared to let Cod kill him. He insists that he is not planning to kill Quark, and their history is just that, history. Odo says, "You could tell a man's intentions by the way he walks." And according to Odo, Cod walks like someone who's carried a lot of weight on his shoulders. "It must be the memories of those Romulan bricks I carried for 8 years, he replies. Odo knows he's up to something, but he has no reason to keep him and so allows Cod to leave, keeping close behind him as he does so. On the promenade, Quark approaches Odo and asks what his opinion is of Cod. Odo admits he believes he is a man with nothing to lose, and gives Quark a combat so he can stay in contact with him at all times. The Joker tells Quark that, if Cod does kill him, he would like to purchase a piece of his body, as per Ferengi tradition. Back in the infirmary, Melora is laid down on a bio bed while Bashir runs some tests on her. She describes a warm sensation down her back, the result of the neuromuscular therapy. The doctor decides that she has had enough of the treatment for today. He asks her how she feels and if she can stand her muscles in normal gravity. At first there is nothing, but as Bashir checks over his calculations, Melora begins to move her toes and then one of her legs. He understands her neural pathways are beginning to adapt, and she may be able to begin walking within the hour. In Ops, Cisco asks O'Brien for an update on an upgrade he's installing on the station. He reports he has been able to get up to 70% of a standard EPS, but is then interrupted mid-sentence by the sight of Melora by standing by herself in the turbo lift, standing beside Bashir. She approaches the commander with the first day's mission report. Cisco was noticeably happy for her, but as O'Brien jokes about Bashir getting his name in the medical journals, Melora begins to look unsettled and stumbles into Bashir. The doctor adjusts her servo controls to compensate, as it is just the first day's treatment wearing off. He helps her back to the turbo lift. The two of them head back to the habitat ring. In her quarters, Bashir explains that, with each progressive treatment, Her muscles will get stronger, but unfortunately she won't be able to use her room's low gravity field, or she could risk confusing her body's motor cortex. She begins to thank Bashir for all he's done, but he stops her. She let him fly for the first time, so he is repaying that by allowing her to walk. After giving her a kiss, he leaves, saying he'll see her in the morning. Yeah. Meanwhile, Quark has also gone to his own quarters. He enters with a drink in his hand and tells the computer to put the lights on, though nothing happens. At first, he thinks nothing of it, but soon realizes Cop may be in the room. Carefully placing his glass on the table, he makes his way back to the door. He tries to go Odo with the comm badge he gave him, but Cod grabs him by the neck. Quark pleads for his life, offering Cod 190 bars of latinum, the profit he would get from the sale of the rings. It's a start, Cod growls, releasing him. Bashir and Melora in the infirmary. Melora complains that how every one of her muscles ached the night before, but Bashir says the effect will improve over time, and her next treatment should last for several hours. She seems happy, but she misses experiencing low gravity and asks Bashir if she would be allowed to do it occasionally. Fortunately, he's worried that if she did, she would experience a loss of fine motor control, meaning her ability to perform complex tasks would be affected. He reassures her that if she does change her mind, the effect is reversible for the next few days, and all she has to do is say so. Later, she and Dax are on the Orinoco, resuming their cartography mission in the Gamma Quadrant. As she heads for the forward controls, she stumbles slightly, indicating her treatment is starting to wear off again. As she takes her seat, she explains to Dax how she is in two minds about the treatment. On the one hand, it will give her more freedom than she ever dreamed, but on the other, she won't be able to go back to her homeworld for anything more than a short visit. Dax compares her situation to The Little Mermaid, an old Earth fable by Hans Christian Andersen. Laura asks if she lived happily ever after, but Dax remains silent. Yeah, I'm going to say no to that. On the station, Quark and Cod are meeting with Ashrock in an airlock. After the necessary introductions, Ashrock hands his bag of latinum to Cod while Quark hands over the rings. However, once Cod has finished checking the payment is there, he pulls out a weapon and shoots Ashrock in the chest. He forcibly grabs Quark to grab both the latinum and the rings and make an escape down the corridor. In the security office, Odo's been alerted to the weapons fire and orders the security team to that section. When they arrive, they're fired on by Cod, who heads down another corridor, where Dax and Melora just disembarking from the runabout. He forces them back inside and orders them to depart the station. In Ops, Cisco, Kira, and O'Brien are tracking the runabout as it leaves the pad. The commander orders their tractor beam to be locked onto the ship as he opens a channel to Cod. He instructs him to return to the station immediately, but there is no reply. The tractor beam is engaged and the runabout comes to a halt. Cod orders Dax to open a channel to the station and demands that Cisco release them or he will kill a hostage. Cisco offers to negotiate, but Cod stops him mid-sentence. He turns to Quark, but then changes his mind and shoots Melora. A charge is sent tearing through her body as the servos overload. Bashir, who has just arrived in Ops, looks on helpless as she falls to the deck. Cod orders him to release the tractor beam before losing the channel. Cisco then orders Kira to beam himself, O'Brien, and Bashir onto the rear Grant and wait 10 seconds before releasing the tractor beam. Back on the Orinoco, Cod demands Dax to take the runabout through the wormhole into the Gamma Quadrant, with the Rio Grande in close pursuit. As Cod instructs Dax to go to warp, Melora quietly regains consciousness in the background. Cod asks if the phasers are online, but Dax refuses to fire the Rio Grande, and if he kills her, he won't be able to fly the ship himself. As she confronts him, Dax notices Melora crawling toward the transport pad and buys her enough time to deactivate the gravity on the runabout. Cod floats into the air when Melora pushes off and slams him into the bulkhead. On the Rio Grande, O'Brien is monitoring what is happening, worrying that the ship has dropped impulse and the artificial gravity is offline. Cisco and Bashir immediately transport over after gravity has been restored to find the situation has been contained and Cod apprehended. Back on the station, Bashir and Melora are talking at the Klingon restaurant, talking. Bashir seems enthusiastic that their treatments will work, but Melora has decided not to go ahead with them. Though she wants to be independent, she fears that if she continues with the treatments, she'll be an Elysian anymore. She thanks Bashir for getting her to realize she can depend on people. The Klingon chef then appears and begins to entertain everyone with a Klingon folk song. The couple sit and hold hands together as the chef waves in and out of the tables. I want to remember all of this, Melora smiles. Oh, well, good for her. All right. So let's take a look at some background information. So beginning with the story and script. A character like Melora Paslar was initially to be Deep Space Nine's science officer because the producers liked the idea of a character came from a low-gravity environment. However, due to the difficulty and expense of recreating the effect constantly, the character was replaced by the Trill Jadzia Dax. Mike Pillar preempted the writing of this by stating, quote, "Before it's all over, we might see that character in an episode." Indeed, the concept of doing an individual episode around such a wheelchair officer remained on the writer's storyboards. Evercolor Summers had become familiar with the concept when serving as a writer's guild intern during Deep Space Nine's first season. He was approached by using the character in a script. It was clear to Summers at that time that the writers wanted the disabled character to be a guest star who would be a potential recurring character and possibly a romantic interest of Bashir's. When Summers was invited back to pitch stories in the second season, he was successful in reviving the concept by convincing the producers that he could provide insight into character as he himself used a wheelchair. You know what, I'm not going to go through the rest of these because, well, I hear my voice is about to go out a bit. So anyway, finally, let's take a look at some continuities throughout this episode. This episode marks the first appearance of the Klingon restaurant on the series. Reference Rules of Acquisition number 16, a deal is a deal. Carl Lofton, who plays Jake Sisko, does not appear in this episode. So overall, I think this is a pretty darn good episode, and yeah, if you guys want to look at the rest of the background stuff on this episode, then you could just go Memory Alpha stuff, so yeah. But yeah, like I said, this is a pretty darn good episode, and I do like the character of Melora. She seems like a character that is just kind of interesting, so yeah. But I highly doubt we'll ever see her again, so yeah. So overall, I give the episode Melora 4 warp cores out of 5. Well, until next time, let's wait to take a look at the next episode, Rules of Acquisition. So, until then, live long and prosper, everybody.